Hi, I'm from the product management of SAP NetWeaver Cloud. SAP NetWeaver Cloud is a platform as a service offering from SAP for Java-based applications. And one of the important things of the platform is, of course, the identity and access management. And that's when Martin comes here into play. Martin Lepple, he's the product owner of identity and access management for SAP NetWeaver Cloud. Martin, explain us, how does identity management work in NetWeaver Cloud?
All right, Rui. Let me give you an overview what is possible out of the box with the platform. And let me start with drawing a picture.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Let's say you are a user connected with your laptop or with your computer to the internet, and you want to access, let's say this is the internet, and you want to access an application running on the NetWeaver Cloud platform. So this is our application deployed by a partner customer from SAP.
Let's take the example that you always use in your blog, so leave request.
Okay, so let's imagine this is an application that manages those leave requests, and so you have the user connected to the internet, and obviously such an application, like a leave request application, requires authentication of that user, because otherwise it wouldn't make much sense. Yeah? So the application needs to know for which user the leave request is being created. So the user somehow needs to authenticate. Okay. And out of the box in NetWeaver Cloud we provide the option to authenticate users against SAP's central authentication system, which is the SAP ID service.
The one that is used, for example, for the SAP Community Network,
right?
Service Marketplace, and so on.
Yeah, SAP ID service is used by many SAP on-demand solutions as well as public websites to authenticate users. So it's a highly secured, reliable system that already manages about 4 million users. So we in NetWeaver Cloud basically also make use of this central system. So let's draw a box for the SAP ID service over here. So now what happens to delegate the authentication of this user to this system when he accesses this leave request application? This is done using a common, widely adopted standard in the industry, a technical protocol used for single sign-on and identity federation, which is called SAML. SAML stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. It's a standard defined by many companies, vendors in the IT industry. So let me quickly explain how the flow works. Yep. So imagine the user logs on or accesses in the first step a protected URL on this leave request application.
So he has his computer here.
He has his computer obviously here. Okay. So starts the browser and clicks on a link that points to a protected URL for this leave request application that requires authentication. So it needs to know who is the user. So what happens is that out of the box, NetWeaver Cloud supports a SAML-based integration with the SAP ID service, which means that the platform will send a so-called SAML request message to this SAP ID service.
Via the browser of the machine.
Everything goes via the user's web browser. So let's say this is step number 1, accessing the protected resource. Step number 2 is redirecting the user to the SAP ID service with a SAML message. And basically the SAML message instructs the ID service to authenticate the user if the user has not yet authenticated. So the user in step number 3 will have to provide the credentials, a username and a password he needs to authenticate against the SAP ID service. And if this authentication step is successful, SAP ID service will successfully or will create a response message sent back again via the user's web browser to the leave request application hosted in NetWeaver Cloud. This message number 4 contains, first of all, a statement made by this system, by the SAP ID service, about the successful login that happened in step number 3. and also contains additional attributes about the user, like the user's first name, last name, his validated email address, so that the application can work with those attributes once the application then has logged on this user in NetWeaver Cloud. So the benefit of this solution is obviously that in case the user, for example, has now successfully authenticated and afterwards, for example, accesses the SAP community network, which also delegates authentication to this central system, the user won't be asked again to authenticate.
Okay.
Step number 3 will basically happen transparently, so he gets single sign-on to NetWeaver Cloud as well as to other community websites, on-demand solutions from SAP that integrate with SAP ID service.
And the ID service knows that based on the IP address of the machine or any cookies that are stored.
Exactly. Okay. There's a session established between this laptop or the browser running on this laptop of the user and the ID service. As well as there's also a session established between the NetWeaver Cloud application here and the browser. So this flow only happens once until either the session expires or the browser is closed, etc.
So everything is done. So what are you doing now? You're done with everything.
Yes, I'm done. Going on vacation. Not really. Well, imagine that you run an application on NetWeaver Cloud as a customer and you want to get all your employees immediate access to this application, right?
No problem.
Well, yes and no. You could just ask those users, well, just please create an account in SAP ID service, and
I know where you're getting to.
So you will be able to authenticate against the application we run in SAP NetWeaver Cloud.
Because that guy already has an account on the corporate network, maybe.
Exactly. So as a customer, and we heard that many times from customers, that they just want to use their existing accounts, which they already have in their corporate user directory, and use those accounts of the employees to authenticate against the application in NetWeaver Cloud.
So what changes then here in the picture?
Well, from a technology perspective, from a protocol perspective, nothing changes. But let's draw this corporate network here below. So let's say this is the corporate network. And again, we have let's say here another user who is an employee of this corporation.
Let me paint the computer.
Oh yes, the nice laptop. So, and imagine we want now this user to authenticate against this leave request application, but now against an account that is stored in the corporate user directory. So this user has an account in such a corporate directory. Many times this is, for example, Microsoft Active Directory, used by many of our customers to manage all their user accounts there. So, what we need in this picture is basically the same box that is provided here with SAP ID service, but we need something similar here in the corporate network in order to provide us with the same flow that we already use for SAP ID service. And fortunately, there are many products in the market that provide the same functionality that SAP ID service does on the public internet, but they do so for corporate identity and access management solutions. And usually those products are called identity providers, IDP. And they usually are an extension of existing user directory solutions. So, for example, in the case of SAP, we have our on-premise product, the NetWeaver Identity Management Solution, is such an identity provider. For Microsoft Active Directory, there's an extension called Active Directory Federation Services, which is basically also such an IDP box that sits on top of AD. The prerequisite we have to make this scenario work in the corporate environment is simply that this IDP box needs to be compliant to the SAML 2.0 standard.
Okay.
The same way that SAP ID services. So that's the only prerequisite we have to make this scenario work. And now let me quickly explain
The flow again.
how the flow works for this guy. So
you want to take the blue one?
Oh yeah. So usually what you do in the morning when you start your computer in a corporate and you are connected to the corporate network, you usually already log on to this IDP in the morning. For example, you log on to your Windows domain. Yeah, and so when you start your computer, you usually authenticate, and you are already, let's say, logged in this network domain. Yeah. So now again, the user launches a web browser and wants to create a new leave request. So now
using
this application hosted by this company, the same scenario. This company has now deployed their leave request application and operates this leave request application in the cloud. And they want to achieve that this user does not need to provide again the username and credentials of his corporate account in order to log on to this application. So what we want to achieve is single sign-on for this user to log on immediately, seamlessly to this leave request application.
Okay, no
additional authentication step and no additional account or credentials stored somewhere. We always want to use this central account to authenticate also against this application. So what happens is basically that, again, a SAML request is sent, like we had it here in step number, the user starts the browser, which again in the first step accesses the protected resource here of this leave request application. The leave request application again will send a SAML request, but now based on a configuration made for this account in NetWeaver Cloud to trust this identity provider instead of ID service. So there is a trust configuration made in the cloud to this system. So now what happens is that the leave request application will send the SAML request
to this IDP.
IDP. Now step number 3, as shown here, will also happen, but seamlessly or transparent for the user, because the user already had logged on in the morning to this identity provider, so he won't be asked again by the identity provider to provide username and password for this account. So this step basically happens more or less transparently.
So that's number 3.
That's number 3. Which means that immediately the identity provider will issue this response back via the user's web browser to the leave request application. That's number 4.
Yeah.
And the user is signed in. So
cool.
we basically get, with the same underlying mechanisms and technologies we already used for the integration with the SAP ID service, we get the same benefits and integration, but with a corporate identity provider based on this SAML 2 standard.
And meaning also that if I have another vendor, I just, let's say, can take this out, substitute it with something like OpenAM, for example, and the only thing I need to do then is actually to configure on the NetWeaver Cloud side application to know this identity provider.
The data you configure here in order to build such a, usually drawn with a dotted line, such a trust relationship to this system, the metadata to configure this trust is always the same, independent of the actual product you use here. Again, the only prerequisite really is that this product only needs to be SAML 2 compliant, and we tested quite heavily already with many products that are in the market. You can go, for example, to our SCN community website, and there you will see tutorials that I published recently about how to configure exactly this scenario with different IDP solutions, including SAP NetWeaver Identity Management, including Active Directory Federation services from Microsoft, OpenAM, which is an open source based solution in this space. So it works basically out of the box with many of those products. But obviously you need to apply some configuration, exactly this dotted line that I draw here, in order to make this scenario work. But that's it. No additional development is required. No heavy setup. It's
configuring.
It's
actually
really about configuring this trust, and then that's it. However, you can also, if you want to pass specific attributes of the user,
like a role, for example,
like a role, for
that you would need for the leave request.
Exactly. So, coming back to our leave request scenario, if there are two types of, let's imagine you have two types of users here in your corporate network. You have employees and managers, just for the sake of simplicity. Employees should be able to create leave requests. Managers should be able to decline or approve those leave requests. Then probably you do not want to maintain those role assignments for each and every employee.
Also there.
So probably you want to propagate those role assignments that are usually already made in this box, in the user directory. You simply want to propagate those role assignments also via this path to the cloud. And that's also possible with our configuration you can apply here. So that's an optional, additional configuration you can apply to your to this trust relationship. So you can, for example, say, I expect certain attributes like cost center ID, organizational attributes about the user, plus, for example, a role membership or group memberships, which I then apply here to assign the user a certain role in that leave request application, like an employee or manager role. Yeah? So, for example, if user JDO is assigned the role, let's say, manager, in that corporate user directory, we are able to, with this SAML2 standard, we are able to propagate this information with this SAML response in step number 4 sent back to the cloud. And we can make use of this information in order to assign the user to, for example, also a manager role in this.
And from that, showing some different user
interface. Yeah, that's then obviously something that the developer of this application needs to take care of. So he just needs to check the user's role using standard Java EE APIs. So is user in role manager, and then the developer can show whatever decline or approve button or something like this. Yeah? Okay. That's the idea.
One question. So what am I painting here? A little birdie, right? So what? At least it looks like. So he's tweeting, or she's tweeting. So if somebody wants to use, instead of, let's say, this very corporate-centric approach to authenticate, something like Twitter, because I mean we saw there are already some blogs who use OAuth as authentication method.
Yes. Yeah.
So how does that work? I mean, apparently it already works, or
yeah. Certainly you can run your own solution there, and as you mentioned, there are already blogs on SCN that show how you can integrate with, for example, Twitter or with Facebook, to authenticate the user against those IDPs. They are also they act as an identity provider, the same way this guy does or this guy does. Yeah, they just use a different protocol. Yeah, so Twitter and Facebook, for example, use a protocol called Open Authorization Protocol, OAuth. That's different from SAML, but it's also a way to authenticate the user and to propagate the user information stored by those IDPs, by Twitter and Facebook, which also have rich knowledge about the user. Yeah? This is why they are or could be good identity providers for certain scenarios. We also want to make this feature available out of the box in NetWeaver Cloud.
So meaning supporting multiple protocols.
Yeah. So right now, as I mentioned, available public available in the product is the integration with based on SAML 2.0 with either SAP ID service or any corporate or usually corporate identity providers that implement this protocol. But on our roadmap is also to support other protocols and to provide out-of-the-box single sign-on with those public social identity providers such as Twitter or Facebook.
Yeah. So meaning that if people want to try out, they can actually implement these steps themselves, like already happened.
Yes.
If people want to know how it works, just check the SAP Developer Center, go to developers.sap.com and then SAP Nativa Cloud. You can find a lot of blogs there describing this, and also Martin's blogs. So this looks pretty promising. So I already tried out the SAP ID service, works pretty well. Didn't try out OAuth yet.
You should.
Yes, I will. Once it's globally available. Not putting pressure on you. No, but what comes next after that? So anything else in the pipeline that you would like to talk about? Briefly.
Well, as mentioned, the social IDP integration is, I think, one of our top priorities. We are also working on better support for authenticating REST APIs that are exposed by applications running on Nativa Cloud. Again, OAuth is here one of the de facto standards to protect those REST APIs, so that's also on our list. And yeah, so I think we have a lot of things still to do, but I'm also proud of the solution we already have, because it really means a lot of flexibility for our customers so far, and we have quite already a lot of customers that either run a pilot with this solution or already have productive applications running on top of this.
Cool. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you very much.
In case you guys have questions to Martin or myself, just send us maybe direct messages on Twitter, or mention us on Twitter. So your hashtag is Rapple, I will put it on the video. Mine is Renugera. And follow the SAP Nativa Cloud Twitter user, SAP NW Cloud. You put there some interesting new stuff there. And maybe we see each other in one of the next interviews where you talk a little bit about other topics.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Martin.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Bye.